Welcome to another episode of Soccer for Us. I am Bart, and on this episode, we are talking mostly about the upcoming CONCACAF Nations League finals and the U.S. men's national team's quest for a third Nations League trophy. We've only played it 3 times, so if we go 3 for 3, I think we're in pretty good position to make the argument we're the best team in this region. But we have to get through Jamaica first, and we have to figure out who we're playing in that final. But we're also going to talk about some other U.S. soccer news and answer some of your questions from Twitter. To do this with me is a man who is inching closer to temperatures above, 5 degrees, I assume. It's the man from Maine, Thomas, a.k.a. U.S. Keeper.
Yeah, we've come off a warm stretch. We're going to be getting some snow here, I think, in the next few days. So spring is here, but it is not, in New England and Maine. Snow chances are there for still a couple months. So, but all's good up here, and it'll melt quickly, I'm sure.
Well, we do not have a theme of melting snow kits this year for U.S. soccer, but we do have the melted rocket pop as a theme for the kit. Let's talk about those. Monday, U.S. soccer announced a new kit for both the men's and women's national teams. They are called the American Classic and the American Icon kit, used at both the Copa America tournament and at the Olympics by both the men's and women's teams. Tell me how you feel about them.
I'll start with the home white. Look, it's a classic look. It is. I don't hate it. I don't love it either, right? It's a classic look with the blue shorts. I don't mind it at all, right? It's a very clean look. There's probably, I tweeted something regarding kind of that classic white look. It's fine. I don't mind it. It's got some stars and stripes on it. I think it's fine. No issue with it at all. I can't think that's just U.S. wants to stick with that look. They're not willing to go away from it. The away one is kind of interesting. I'm mixed on it. I think it's one that's either going to grow on me that I like it or grow on me that I don't like it. I think where I don't like it, I don't like red shorts. I've never liked the United States wearing red shorts. It's never been my thing. I posted something earlier this week about like the 5 or 6 kits where they've worn red shorts with them. Not my favorite, but it's decent looking. Some of the gear that goes with it is pretty nice. Some of the track jackets look nice. So it's it's decent. Could have been worse.
I agree. I think for me, I really do like the blue and red kit. I think it at least looks very loud and American, right? I know it's not got quite the iconography of the U.S., but like it looks very U.S. And especially for a summer where you're going to be playing not mainstay tournaments, if you will. And I know the Olympics is another thing entirely for the women, but we both agree that it could take a backseat in importance. I think it's a fun look. I think that to me is important, that the secondary kit be something that is interesting. And I do think it'll look good on both fans and players. And I think that's important. Again, calling it the melted bomb pop or rocket pop because it does look like a little bit of a melting icicle, popsicle, whatever. But the white ones I like, but I think what I just keep running into is the same problem you have, is just having a white shirt is not a look. And that, although they paired it with some nice blue shorts, they have the consistent theme of the red and white stripes going around the cuff, going around the collar, going around the hem of the shorts. Is that enough to make it look truly American? I don't really think so. And especially when this is the national team and we do want to feel like, excited to wear the jersey,
Yeah, I would agree. It's fine. Look, I'm biased. I'm obsessed with this sash. I think you could have put a nice red, white, and blue sash in the middle of this thing, and made it and just added that there, right? And then everything ties into the other themed pieces of it that go along with it. I mean, we've seen it; it's a good look, and so I think that's a standout. You're not gonna that's gonna stand out with the white. If you want the white, fine, but just throw the sash in there, throw something else in there, because essentially it's a white T-shirt with your crest on that and a couple, a couple collar, something that a dark collar, stars or whatever it is on it. It's not it just doesn't stand out. And I think that's kind of critical. I think it's always about the identity. I don't understand why that is. We've seen other Nike kits just released that have a little bit of that flavor. I don't particularly like them. I wouldn't want the US to have them necessarily, but but I think the US is not the people decision makers are not making decisions. They're just saying do whatever you want,
Mhm.
because these other kits that we're seeing, the Norway one, not my favorite, but guess what? It's different. The Nigeria one, Nigeria always comes up with some creative kits, right? In terms of that sort of thing. So I think some of the blame has to go, or maybe more of the blame has to go on U.S. Soccer for not really being adventurous with this. Like, I don't think I'll buy these kits either. Like, they're fine, but I don't think I'm going to spend money
Mhm.
on the kits, because to me, there's like, okay, they're fine. Like, I'm not going to spend $175 on a kit for a standard white, which kind of already exists in multiple forms. I want
The
to be
issue
wild.
that I the issue that we get into, and you're exactly right, is that U.S. Soccer is making a lot of these decisions. If you listen to the episode I did, what now, 3 episodes ago, with my friend Greg from FTC United, um, the club or the national team does influence the design that Nike and or Adidas or whoever works with. Obviously, Adidas and Nike, they have their own team of designers who actually take the idea and run with it. What you've identified is, I think, the problem is that U.S. Soccer sees the white shirt as its brand. Similar to how here in Atlanta, we do red and black stripes. You look at a team like Arsenal, they do red shirt, white sleeves. You look at Manchester United, red, white, black. You look at Barcelona with the, wine and blue. Even to an extent, if you see Real Madrid, which is an all white kit, they have made those their brand and it works. And the thing is, I guess US Soccer has seen the white kit, specifically the white kit, as its brand, because that is the primary. It has done more adventurous things with its secondary look. I remember, back in 2021, we had the zebra stripe, whatever, red and blue shirt. We had the Copa America pinstripes, 2 times ago, 2 Copas ago, I should say. We've had adventurous looking kits, but it just does seem that U.S. Soccer sees that white shirt as its brand. And while that may be a little too on the nose, it's disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, go round and round on that. I think disappointing is the way to do that, because I think you can add a little bit to that, make it more American looking, and that's it. Like, I don't think you have to do a lot. I think there's as in an earlier tweet today, I think you could take pieces of some of the past kits that are probably the more popular ones and incorporate it into the white home, the
Yeah.
blue, the red, and then like some other random crazy ones like we've seen before, like the obviously '94 World Cup Stars one. That's crazy. Like, that's just it's not something you're going to see that often, right? And so I think I don't think they want to take the risk. I don't think they want to sell jerseys either, right? I think that's the thing. Like,
I think it is that they want to sell jerseys while they don't take too many risks, because I remember specifically people did not like the paint splatter kit that the women wore at the World Cup. And I thought it was a good, I thought it was a good risk to take. It's not overtly crazy. It's not super invasive on the eye. It's just a nice little texture that they put on the kit, add some different color to it. But I don't know. I think they think that if they do something like that, it's not going to sell well.
Yeah, I think it's about consistency though, right? Like, hey, here's kind of what a homework's going to look like. We'll modify it here and there, put different textures on the material, but it's
Yeah.
going to be this with a sash or whatever it is, right? And then here's our, here's our blue away kit or whatever it is, right? And we're going to do this. And it's going to be consistent, just like every other club team does in the world, right? And then you could throw out a new kit every year with something that's just off the wall, right?
Yeah.
And trust me, these fans are crazy. They will buy some of the crazier ones in general. I will say I can't remember which one it is, but I think it's the 2021 kit, which is like kind of like the Waldo kit, all broken up in pieces.
Yeah.
Like that kit grew on me. Like I didn't like it at first, but it totally grew on me.
Mm-hmm.
Like in terms of one. And again, we talk about it. I think it's one of your favorites. It's one that's I absolutely love now. Is the 2018 home, which would have been for the World Cup, where you've got the hoops and they're fading in and fading
Yeah.
out. Like that is sweet.
Into
Like,
somewhat of a sash. Right. Yeah.
yeah. The whole thing is just sweet about it. Like
Yeah.
I can't get over that one. It's unfortunate we couldn't wear it in the World Cup, but that one there, it's just grown on me big time.
So we agree it's all Jurgen Klinsmann's fault. All right, awesome. Moving on, let's talk about the fact that these kits are going to be worn at the Olympics. We know we're qualified, and we've got two U23 men's team matches coming up. First on Friday, March 22nd, they will face Guinea in Olat, Spain, and then head over to France for a friendly against Libya on March 25th in Montpellier. If I pronounced that incorrectly, I hope it pissed off all the French people listening. Look, they have a roster that will, as we talked about the Nations League roster that we'll get into in a bit. That Olympic team roster, I don't want to say it influenced the Nations League, but allowed Greg to focus solely on building the best roster for the Nations League, as opposed to, and he talked about it a lot in his press conference, bringing in some players that are just like, oh, they would be good to get in camp for experience. This Olympic team roster seems to be a very good roster, and then also focused on getting as good of possible players as they can, who hopefully are going to Paris this summer. You're a big proponent of getting as many, youth national teams, specifically Olympic national team, matches and camps as possible. This has to be the perfect thing for you.
It is. I mean, I was like, the roster blew me away. The fact they got 2 friendlies over in Europe, they're really doing what they need to do for this. My only concern is that you're gonna have this isn't gonna be the team, right? Like
right. It absolutely, that's the concern.
You're right. So because because these players might not be released, right? The clubs have to be able to release these players so that they can play in the Olympics, and that's not a guarantee because it's not required.
What I'm hopeful for is that they're having these conversations now. Does that make sense? So like they're calling in players they're confident will be released.
Right. That was my understanding too, is how they're going to try to build this and try to find that continuity with this core group of 20, whatever amount of players they're trying to keep in the mix for these camps heading into the Olympics. So it's I'm hopeful that will happen, but you just never know, like, because it's such a good group. It's got a nice good age range from some 19-year-olds to there's a couple 23-year-olds on this squad. Like it's a really good balance, and it's a nice looking squad. I mean, it's pretty well balanced. Going over there. So 2 friendlies are going to be awesome for this group. I'm very interested to see how they perform.
And honestly, to your point, like it's a good balance, but it's also a very experienced roster. I mean, most of these players, outside of like a couple, are starting weekly for club teams, or playing a significant amount of minutes for their club teams. And like you said, they have to be under 23, so these are inherently young players playing a lot of minutes for their club teams. I mean, Kevin Paredes is an almost weekly starter for a Bundesliga team, but then you have guys like Tolkien and Wiley who are younger than that and starting a lot for their MLS teams. And then you even have a guy like Bajak who, really his second season in MLS. That to me is the most positive thing about this roster, is just seeing how many good professional players we have under the age of 23. Whether or not they make it far and Paris is one thing or another because we don't know. We'll find out that draw on Wednesday. But just getting these types of this opportunity for this cohort is important.
Yeah, and I think that's the key, right? In seeing what they can do, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. They could get a great draw and be able to get out of the knockout stage. Get into the group stage, into the knockout stage. That will be helpful for them. But it's only 16 teams, so it's definitely it's a condensed tournament for sure.
Well, speaking of condensed, also if you have to be reminded there's only 18 players allowed at that Olympic roster. This particular Olympic team roster has 20, so obviously 2 of those players are going to be cut. So again, some kind of built-in stakes into this camp as well. But the most important camp going on is the U.S. men's national team's camp as they prepare for the CONCACAF Nations League finals. Now, we have won this twice already, both editions. You may remember back in I think they announced this in 2020. 2019, they announced this, I should say. The goal was to play these finals in this March international window. Then COVID happened and it pushed back until, June of 2021. They kind of just repeated that for the 2023 tournament. We're finally back on schedule, if you will. So getting back into the original slot of this March window for Nations League finals. This roster, I think, just first off, is the best 23 players that will be playing at this tournament. This group is the most talented team of the 4 coming. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would say so. It's an experienced team, a team that we've seen a lot together for the most part. I mean, there's not a lot of surprises, I think, in the roster selection. If everyone's healthy, I think there's always going to be the debate of the the last player of each position on the team. But I think, I think it's a strong squad. I mean, and there's really no reason they shouldn't go out and perform well. I mean, there's a lot of players that are in excellent club form right now, and I think that really hopefully translates to the national team in this tournament. Trust me, these players are hungry. They're excited to be there. They're having fun. Like it's a great group, and it's fun to see that. Right? They're loose, and if they can win this headed into Copa America, hopefully it sets the tone for a great tournament there. But because they've got big stakes, coming ahead of them. So let's start strong with this, with this 2024 year, because this is the first international window where players are released. So let's start strong and win a third consecutive Nations League title.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that this roster for the U.S. does have some weaknesses in depth, but I'm not super concerned when you look at the overall roster and the talent and versatility that some of these players have. Let's talk about the 23 players called in. And again, this is only 23 because this is Nations League. This isn't Greg being constricting for no good reason. So we can yell at him for a lot of things. This is not one of them. 23 players. That's all you get. Goalkeeper is Drake Callender, Ethan Horvath, Matt Turner. I think you and I would agree that Matt and Ethan, those are the dudes, 1 and 2. And then, I guess Drake Callender is fine.
Yeah, no complaints there. I think he's earned it. He's got a lot of minutes with Inter Miami right now. There's kind of a spotlight on that, so he's maybe trying to pull in some different group of fans by being put on this roster. But I don't have any complaints with it. The young guys are over. Gaga was on the original U23 roster, but replaced due to injury with Chris Brady. Both of those players, I expect to see them probably making some rosters after Copa America and the Olympics. So.
Well, and I think to your point, Greg mentioned that this is one of those cases where he said Gaga's going to get better experience by actually playing, because that was probably the plan, is for him to actually play in those friendlies for the U23 team rather than just being in camp and sitting the bench for these finals. And again, I'm not in a hurry to rush any of these young goalkeepers into the senior national team. They will have plenty of time. I don't think you need to get a 20-year-old Gaga Slonina or even a 21-year-old Patrick Schulte into the men's national team, senior national team, like tomorrow. I'm sorry. I'm going to just stay with that. I think you have until 2026 even before you have to break them in, just because of the progression that goalkeepers take. I was having this conversation with a friend the other day, and she was very adamant that Schulte should be on the national team roster because, that rumor of him getting interest from Arsenal. And I said, I don't think he's even the best U23 goalkeeper in MLS, because I still think Chris Brady is. He's just playing for a very good Columbus Crew team. Now, I think Schulte is a fine goalkeeper, but even still, I can't make a prognostication, prediction of which goalkeeper is going to be our number one post 2026. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think it's a hard prediction, and we've seen some good keepers kind of early on. I can't remember.
JT Marcinkowski is a great example of a guy who was on these Olympic teams. Even Klinsmann's kid. Jonathan Klinsmann was a pretty decent goalkeeper at a young age, and they haven't really panned out.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Was it Cody Cropper or whatever?
Cody Cropper, yeah.
Cody Cropper. He was a keeper like he had some high, high ceiling, and there was some high expectations on him, and it just didn't pan out, right? So there's time in between that, and it's that consistency. It's not losing confidence, and so as much as we might want to see younger keepers come in, I think there's a proper timing and progression for keepers, right? Their careers are longer. Their primes are different times in their career than the average, the other positions on the field. So I think you just be patient with it. I mean, Turner's going to continue growing. Horvath is in a good club situation right now, and we still have Stefan maybe as well. So we have players there. It's just a matter of seeing if they can get the right situation for them to get the right amount of playing time and growth possibilities, because I think that's going to be critical headed into this 2026 World Cup, to make sure you have your whole squad players playing at a high level and performing. So
well, that's what matters, right? Is I think, to me, you have your top two goalkeepers in Turner and Horvath, and no one's done enough to unseat them. So the third goalkeeper to me is not super important. So for an experienced pro like Drake Callender, who, as you mentioned, playing for Miami, it's not like he's playing for a bad team. He's certainly playing with some good players. Whatever, it's not. I'm not going to get too upset about that.
Well, there's a group of people that would say, hey, well, if the third one doesn't matter, then why not bring in Gaga or Brady, right? Well, I think there's a time and place for that, right? Copa America, maybe, but
even then, I want them to go to the Olympics. I mean, that's the thing.
If it's a choice, then go to the Olympics for sure.
And this is something that you and Caleb have been talking about, is like establishing that progressive pipeline through the youth national teams. Not every player goes from a Gio Reyna playing at the U17 World Cup to starting, playing in the next World Cup. That's not normal. So you do have to have kind of these established pipelines so that you allow players to progress naturally, as opposed to just throwing them into the lion's den. 8 defenders on this roster. Serginho Dest, who is, suspended for the first game because of going crazy. Christopher Lund, Mark McKenzie, Tim Ream, Chris Richards, Anthony Robinson, Miles Robinson, Joe Scally. Now, I'm going to sit here and tell you that I think these are about the 8 best defenders we could call in. I think there are arguments for others, but this group of defenders is still pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's a solid group. I mean, I would say the only, because he was injured, is
right.
Cameron Carter-Vickers. That's probably the only player that I would consider in here. I will say,
if CCV's here, I agree. I don't think either McKenzie or Robinson are on the roster.
Yeah,
or maybe Ream. I don't know where Ream stands. I don't know.
Yeah, Ream, for me, look, he's done a lot. He's 36 years old. Okay, like that. I think that number sticks out to me, and he's slowly starting not to play for his club on a regular
Yeah.
basis. So that's a little bit of a sign that he's being managed his minutes and his abilities, right? And he's been solid, but he's 36. So what
Yeah.
point do you look to, like, I think it's a big opportunity to see what other center back pairings are going to work. And so is Greg willing to take that leap, right?
Yeah.
He's a fine backup right now, right? Fine backup. I have no issues with that. But is Greg going to say, hey, it's going to be, you know, whoever with, in my opinion, Richards with whoever, right?
I think it's absolutely Richards and then another
right,
player.
right. Is it going to be Richards in Robinson? Is it going to be Richards in CCV? Like whoever it's going to be, going forward, is we need to start seeing that because there is a continuity that center backs have to build together, and you have to build it now, and especially when you go into the Copa America.
Well, and let's be honest, I think Tim Ream, I don't think you can rely on him past Copa America. Who knows what Fulham's going to be like for him next year. They're having a decent enough season to stay above the line. Granted, like everyone below them is getting points deductions for some reason, but they're safe for that. So is Tim Ream a Premier League level player next year? We'll see. I think there was some consternation over bringing in. We only have 2 right backs, so it's gonna have to be Joe Scally in that first game. I don't know if anyone else around the right back position is good enough to unseat Joe Scally. I do think that they could have considered a DeJuan Jones, but I also understand that you can't, because you only have 23 players. You kind of have to still pick the best 23 players you can.
Yeah, I think that's where the whole Dest thing comes into kind of a conversation. Like Dest, I don't want to say he was really punished for what he did outside of the red card, but like maybe you just don't call him into this one. Say, hey, look, we need to have our full 23, right? I mean, to me, I understand why you want him there. I understand all those things, but like you kind of need your full 23 too, because if something happens, like to Scally in either in training or even during the match, like.
Yeah. Who's your right back?
Like, right. It's not really smart, in my opinion. Like, I don't like bringing injured players to tournaments. And, it's one thing when you're already in a tournament, if you have to manage through that, that's one thing. But to me, I don't. And he's having a great season, but to me, it's almost like, hey, you're potentially putting yourself a little exposure on yourself potentially on that. So, because you don't really have another player that can play the right, that jumps out on the squad. I mean, someone could do it, but.
I think your backup right back is in the next group of players. Midfielders, Tyler Adams, Johnny Cardoso, Weston McKennie, Yunus Musa, and Gio Reyna. Your backup right back is Tyler Adams. That's if Joe gets hurt somehow in the game, put it on Tyler. You can play right back. A little bit less running for him.
We're going back to that. We're going back to that philosophy then.
I mean, that's the problem, right? Because if Joe gets hurt in the first game, you do not have a right back. I think it's Tyler Adams. Maybe it's also like, I don't know, put Brendo out there.
Yeah.
I think this is the most intriguing group of players because outside of Luca De La Torre, who got hurt and is no longer on the roster, replaced by Brendan Aronson, who's listed as a forward, but we know he can play both. I don't think any of these players are at all being debated their spot on this team. Does that make sense? I don't think that Tyler, Johnny, Weston, Yunus, Gio, none of them are being usurped by anyone else.
No, I mean, I think when you look at it, Jesse Marsh had an opinion on the Reyna selection, but you kind of look at Reyna and Adams, and it is okay to question, their form. I mean, Adams is just coming off injury. What's his capability, and Reyna really hasn't gotten minutes with Nottingham Forest. So I think you can ask yourself a little bit on that. But there's no like, well, it's definitely so and so. Like, Reyna's a pretty healthy. He's kind of a no brainer for me, right?
Right.
Adams. I mean, I'm okay that he's there, but he's going to be off the bench.
Yeah.
Type of player. Maybe. Because depending, what type of lead you're holding or what type of situation you're in, he's off the bench. I think
one of the issues is Leonard Maloney also picked up an injury. So he's not available. And I think Greg would trust him enough to call him in. Kellen Acosta hasn't really been a part of this group since the World Cup. So he's not really on that radar. I don't know of another defensive midfielder, right? Maybe you could call in another attacker and you move Malik. I keep calling him Malik and Brendan or Brendan back to like a true midfielder, but these are just nominal positions that it doesn't matter. So you could have brought on like another winger maybe if you don't bring on Tyler Adams, because I think that's probable. But I'm hesitant to say I like having Tyler in camp. I think I like having a captain in camp. I think I like having a leader in camp. I'm concerned that he probably can't go more than 60 minutes.
Right. And I would agree with that. And I think back to your other point, I think some of the other depth players are on that U23 team.
True.
Tessman, Lucio, I think those are the other players that would have maybe gotten the consideration as well, which is good. It's good to have that depth. But I mean, I like having the same core group be there for the most part, right? Like that's so important. These guys are still young too. That's the thing. Like they're still a young group. They're just getting into their primes, and we need to see different combinations in the center back position. We need to see them, Greg, work with that. I mean, the only thing is, I just saw Johnny's still not in camp. I guess he's on his way. I don't know what circumstances are resulting in that. But I just saw that he's on his way.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure why that is. So it's, I don't know if it's an injury issue or something.
It's always something for this guy, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's always something.
It's always like I'm ready for Johnny, and then there's always something.
Well, that's the thing. You're ready for Sargent too. Like you look at some of these players, and it's like they can't seem to like timing is just not right.
Yeah. Do you think Brendan or Malik need to play in the midfield, or do you think we need to leave them as winger options in the forward position? We're kind of blending that in, but I mean,
the great thing is they can do both, right? I think that's, and look, Aaronson's had a tough season. He had a great game this past weekend. He's fighting for his life at club. He's fighting for his life with a national team, which is, hard on him, but good for the teams, right? Because he's pushing, right? So I think they can play either way. I think it all depends how they decide to play. I mean, and what, and where they are, in 60, 70 minutes in the match, right? Are they ahead, holding a lead? Aronson provides a lot of energy out there. I'll be honest with you, I don't know how much Tillman is able to defend as well. I haven't seen a lot of that from him, in general. I mean, I just haven't seen it. Like, so.
Yeah, he's an okay ball winner up the, in not possession, but, like those immediate regain possession. But like, I'm with you. Like, he's not like a defender by any stretch. He's not going to help us when we get into an actual defensive block.
Right. I think Aronson does that more. Right? He can, he's going to bring a lot of energy on when he comes in.
It's also important to note that we won last year's Nations League with Yunus Musa as the 6, and I'm not saying I want to see that again. I'm just saying that if Tyler's not fully fit, which he's not, if Johnny can't go, then maybe Yunus Musa is not like the worst possible person to have out there.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly expect him to start. I don't think he's lost his position. I selfishly just want to see Johnny out there with, with this A group and see how he meshes with the players, right? To see what he can do. I mean, he's shown well with his new club over in
he's in Spain.
Spain. I was going to say Italy, in Spain, over in Spain, and he really. We just, to Caleb's point, we just haven't seen it with a national team, but to the other point, he hasn't really been given a huge amount of opportunity to do that. So has he earned it? I think now he's earned it, right? For sure. He's proven, and he's he's played at a high level over in New York for, a couple months now. So that's why I want to badly see it, to see if he's able to provide that needed depth, in that position.
And he's in one of those positions of need, right? Where I'm a person who believes that like actual talent and like class outweighs form necessarily. Tim Way is a great example of like, I know what Tim Way gives us. He's a great player. The fact that he's not playing that much for Juve doesn't bother me, right? If he's fit and healthy, I'm playing him for the U.S. national team. A little bit same with Gio. Like, I'm not going to say I'm always going to start Gio because I do think it depends a little bit on the opponent, but like, I'm going to prefer to start Gio for just about any match if he's fit. But on the flip side, Johnny hasn't really shown it for the U.S. national team, but he's been putting in a lot of good games for his club. So in the position right now where like we need a guy, I'm fine with that. Sargent's a dude who I know he's having a great season, but Ballo and Pepe have proven it for the U.S. national team over and over again. At least Pepe has, and Ballo hasn't given me any reason to believe he can't do it. So it's kind of like, well, I know Josh is having a lot of success, but like form and actual production for the national team, they're not the same. And I think Johnny is one that his club form is getting him these looks. He just now has to finally prove it with the U.S. national team. And he should get that opportunity in these Nations League finals. Let's talk about the forwards. Brendan Aronson, Valerian Balogun, Malik Tillman, Ricardo Pepi, Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah, and the new one, Haji Wright. So we haven't talked about him. Haji replaces Josh Sargent, who, again, got hurt before camp. So another guy who, sorry, I can't rely on you to even be healthy. I'm not going to give you first chance call up to this camp. I think it's fair to say that the winger depth on this roster is what's concerning because behind Christian and Tim, I think it's fair to say I don't have a whole lot of confidence in whoever's going to be a winger. But the fact that you have Pepe, Ballo, and Wright who can play, up top, they're all scoring. Well, Ballo is scoring enough, but Pepe scoring at a good clip when he comes on. Haji having a great season for Coventry. And then you add Pulisic, who's doing everything for AC Milan. Like, this attacking group is pretty darn good.
Yeah, it's a good-looking group. I mean, to your point, the winger depth is concerning, but I think you do have some of those strikers that can play that as well, and maybe he can even play it better. And I think this is where I think Greg has to kind of look at, and he did, I think, in one of the matches where he started Pepe and Balogun together.
Yeah.
Like, I think at some point you start to take a look at these combinations and see what's going to work. Can a 3-back thing work? Can a 2-striker thing work? And see what's going to work to find those combinations because different opponents you got to attack differently. So, and the way two strikers work, it's a little bit different and a little bit more out wide. And I think that's you have the ability with the available strikers in this pool to do that. So it's nice to have the depth. It's nice to have these strikers playing at a high level and scoring in there. I am disappointed that Sargent is injured. He's been playing well, but
yeah.
And it's nice to see it. But I think one of the points too, when you look at the player, if you call him in or you don't call him in, partly it's especially with strikers, are they scoring? Are they producing? Right? And but also what level they're playing at too. Because don't get fooled by something. I mean, look, Sargent's been on fire. He's helped you.
But so is Wright. So if you're going to make any claim that Sargent absolutely has to be here, so does Wright. So I think people, I don't know. Sorry, I just don't like this discussion because I'm like, if you can't see that Valerian Balogun is a more talented player as a striker, I understand he's not scoring that much, but he's at some point you have to understand that the people making decisions at professional soccer clubs have more knowledge of the game and definitely more access to analytical data than we do. They see Valerian Balogun as a guy that they are willing to put money toward and continue to play him. And he's got 5 goals and 3 assists. It's not like he's having a stinker of the season, but it's just not as good as I think he would want.
Right, and I think part of that too, when you look at the roster and you look at your talent, especially with international teams, you got to figure, let's keep a simple system. Let's keep a simple, attacking goals in mind. You have to find that with the pool you have and make sure you're getting the best out of that, right? And I think that's where Greg has struggled because in putting these players in positions for success for that, right? Yeah. And so I think that's where Balogun, if Reyna starts and Balogun starts, we've seen those two connect pretty well together, on the attacking third. So I kind of want to see that because that combination has created some opportunities and goals.
Well, I think the next question of this though is, are your backup wingers Haji Wright on the left, or do you think Brendan and Malik are adequate enough backup wingers on either side?
Yeah, I think they could probably play either side on that. I
Okay.
think, that's what I think. Again, I think that's a function of just what our player pool has. I think we're lacking that right now, and in any quality, because it's not like you've got an injured player that can't do that. I mean, we just don't have players that are stepping up. To, with this pool again, after the Olympics, then you start pulling in a Booth, maybe a
Mhm.
Paredes, right? But right now, where we are, they have to kind of prioritize a little bit more, um, between the two tournaments, and I think they did a good job at doing
Yeah.
that.
Let's recap again the injuries. Sergeant De La Torre, Carter Vickers are the three main injuries here. Worth noting, there are some others that maybe kind of picked up injuries. I don't think they're in like any real conversation. I mentioned Maloney. I know Taylor Booth has been on and off injury. Um, but but besides those players, I'm gonna anger some people, especially here in Atlanta. I don't really think there are any out and out snubs on this roster. What do you think?
No, I wouldn't say so. Again, you have to take in mind that we've got the Olympic camp. And so, like, I know some of these players are on the provisional roster, and you might want to see them. I mean, look, there you could again, it's always that last minute Trusty comes to mind, right? Like, well, he's better than Marcus
He's
King.
playing in the
Well,
Premier League. He's better than everyone we've ever had. And it's like, well, he's
right.
playing on.
And so and so I think that's where you see some of that like conversation happen. Again, that's not a bad thing to have. Like, okay, you're talking about a third striker. Is it right? Is it Sargent? Like in general, like that's not a bad problem to have. I think people just have their own preferences, right? They
Yeah.
have their own biases towards the players they want to see. I mean,
Yeah.
every fan is like that, and so, but I think it's a good position to be in to have a roster where you can to do that. I mean, like you could say is like Zendejas. I mean, he's had a pretty good run in
He's had a
recent years,
decent stint.
right? So he could have been a winger they called him, but they didn't, right?
But he's also another guy who, and I'm going to contradict myself in a little bit when I talk about the next player, but I think Zendejas has had opportunities with the national team. He had an entire Gold Cup and just it didn't work for him. And that doesn't mean he's written off forever, but in a must-win set of games, do you trust him?
I mean, yeah, I keep going back to this with certain players. He hasn't had a huge opportunity to play with the A group,
Sure.
right? Like, and then I think like you got to. I mean, he played in a Gold Cup, but he would needed to be one of the the leading attackers on the team, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think I don't think that role is for him necessarily. So I think that's where finding those combinations, finding those spots for these players to be able to excel is going to be kind of important now and going forward for the national team. So again, no real snubs. I mean, yes, there's players that we would have maybe liked to see, and none of them, in my opinion, would have replacing who you got to replace them with. I guess is always the question, right?
Yeah, I agree. I think that this roster, I think the players that were injured were the only ones that got, quote, left out. That's just my take. I think most everyone else on this, I think everyone else deserves to be on this roster for what it is. And again, I think it's still the most talented group of players that are going to be at this, these Nations League finals. And this 23 should absolutely win, in my opinion, a third Nations League trophy. We'll talk more about that, but we're going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about Jamaica and our match against them, and then potentially a final.
All right, welcome back to Soccer for Us. I think we may have fixed some audio issues in the break as well. Let's talk about our opponent in the first game of the Nations League Finals. That is Jamaica. Thomas, we have not lost to Jamaica since 2019. Overall, we have a decent competitive record against Jamaica, but they always seem to beat us when we are a little down and they're feeling themselves. And it feels like they're feeling themselves big time right now.
Yeah, Jamaica's an up and coming, international team. They've got some, really talented players, playing at high levels, and you can't sleep on them for sure. Their roster does look like it's a little bit, I know there's a few players that are not on it, and there's a couple that are dealing with suspensions for the first match. So, that definitely, goes to the advantage of the U.S. and I think they'll should expose them in that situation, and just be able to find a victory on that. But it's still gonna be a hard fought match, I think, and hopefully they can get a few early ones and take that pressure off.
Yeah, they're definitely, I would describe them as a top end heavy team. Does that make sense? They've got a
Yeah.
lot of really good talent at like the top 5 or 6 players, but then they also still are pulling guys up from USL Championship,
Yeah, and I think that that's just the growth of it. I mean, the U.S. has drawn against them twice
I know.
the last 2 matches. Like, there's in a World Cup qualifier and the Gold Cup. Like, there's they're definitely a team to not take for granted. And I don't think they will, but they do have some talent, and if the right players can find the right spots, then they can definitely be dangerous on the attack. It's just gonna be a matter of
Their attacking speed, both the speed at which they create attacks and then the speed of all their players that they have up there is really scary. Which is, we'll talk lineups in a bit, but I think that should very heavily weigh on Greg's decision on who he starts at center back. If that's any hint, don't start a very aged, slow player against Jamaica. But I also think that at the back end, they're very weak. I mean, Andre Blake in goal is going to be, he's a very good goalkeeper. He's won MLS Keeper of the Year, I don't know how many times now, but their center backs are not the caliber that most of our attackers are used to going up against. And while they defend very differently, they're going to be much more physical. Our group of attackers should have no problem, in my opinion, should have no problem finding ways to beat this team and behind. Now, that said, I think the wild card is how does their coach, Heimer Hagmerson, line them up? That name sounds familiar. He was the coach of Iceland when he took them to the 2018 World Cup and did some great things at the Euros. So they were a very defensive team, right? They weren't a team that was building pretty possessive soccer. This Jamaica team doesn't quite do that, but they are very okay with absorbing pressure and hitting on the break. They're very okay with playing direct. And that's what kind of scares me, is what type of defensive mindset are they going to come out with?
Yeah, and that again, the playing the low block, it's very hard for any team to score, right? And so I think that's where that creativity that Reina brings, and Balogun, his movement in those areas is going to be critical, right? If you get a few early goals, like they can't play, they're not playing for a draw, right? They're
right.
Jamaica wants to play a 1-goal game. That's going to be the best chance for them to get a result. But U.S. has to be able to find that attack, and I think that's important, right? To be able to do that, get on the board early, and control that sort of thing to put them back on their heels, and they have to open it up, right? They're going to have to try to get their goals, and yeah, I'm interested to see how Greg lines up with it too, and because it seems like, I feel like it's been a long time since we've seen this full group together. So it's
I feel like even in the fall friendlies, like we didn't have like I mean, obviously Tyler Adams wasn't there, but it didn't feel like we had a full selection to pick from.
Right. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they line up with, with Jamaica and that. I assume they'll play some sort of low block in general, to kind of start.
Yeah.
But
Which is concerning. We've seen this team under Greg Berhalter specifically struggle to break down low blocks, especially organized low blocks, which we'll talk about the next potential teams in a bit. But there's going to be a couple teams in this finals that will probably play a low block. That said, what would your lineup be against Jamaica?
I do Turner and goal, Scally right, and what I think it's going to be, or what I think Greg will do, or what I will do. I guess I don't think there'll be a lot of variation. I think Greg will still. I think he will start Ream, but I wouldn't. I would probably start. I'd probably go Robinson and Richards, and then I would go Jedi on the left.
Mm-hmm.
Center midfield's tough right now. Johnny not being in camp yet, and I did just see that Acosta has been brought into camp as well. So that is something to kind of keep an eye on. But Johnny's supposedly on his way, but I don't know the circumstances. But I would probably go with Musa, McKinney, and Reyna. As much as I want to see Johnny, he just hasn't been part of the camp, and the match is coming up pretty quickly. And then I'd go Way on the right, Balogun on striker, and then Pulisic on the left.
I would put Miles Robinson and Chris Richards as my starting center backs. I think you do need Miles's pace and aerial ability in a game like this. I think McKenzie is an okay shout. I just don't know if I personally trust him as much as Miles. And if Johnny's able to play, I have to play him. Yeah, I mean that's it. I don't know where Gio Reyna stands right now because it's been, reported that he kind of had injuries that kept him out of even, match day squads for Nottingham. And it just feels very much like how it was heading into the World Cup 2 years ago, where it was like, wait, is he healthy? He says he's healthy, but his club isn't playing him. Which one is it? That concerns me. But I also trust that Greg knows if he's actually healthy or not. If he's healthy, he's playing,
Right. I mean, I would assume, you're not going to, again, this is where you don't call injured players into tournaments like this, and hope to get 30 minutes out of them or half out of them, right? You've got to bring healthy players, that can go out there and give you more than, the half. And so that's where we know he's not playing a lot or much at all for Nottingham, but if he's healthy, he needs to be playing. I mean, I think, especially against a Jamaica team.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are still, and this is where I think people are getting, we joked about this in our little chat, like people are getting mad at Greg because the roster call-ups seem too predictable. And I'm like, well, yeah, who else is getting called in? Like, I think this is one of those things where, again, we can yell at Greg for a lot of things, but we're just trying to make up things to get mad at him for, and getting mad that we have a consistent group of 25-ish players that are going to get called in. If it's our best camp possible, like, I don't think that's something you can fault Greg for. They're like, oh, he's not scouting well enough. Who else needs to be scouted? I don't understand that question.
But and this is the problem, right? He's playing it correctly. Because again, you have to prioritize two tournaments.
Right.
So maybe a player or two is different, right?
Maybe Paredes is the only one that I truly would have been like, maybe this is a good camp for him. But it's just like, that's it.
Right.
I mean,
but
Gaga,
but like,
I'm sorry.
But that's not a bad thing, though, right? So I mean, he's not calling in, Zarnez's or even Jesus Ferreira's type players, right? Like,
yeah.
Players that's that he relied on. Like, he's not calling those players in, right now. So like, now you're just complaining to complain. Like, yes, there's a player or two that I have bias towards or I prefer to have seen. Okay, they didn't make it. Okay, but it's still a pretty damn good squad. Like, it's again, it's and so like that nitpickiness to me, it's just, I don't know. Like, he's just trying to find this excuse to complain about. Look, I'm not a huge fan of Greg, but like in this case here, he's put a pretty damn good squad together. So
I mean,
but it kind of picks itself too, right?
And
so,
that's it. That's what I'm saying. Like, why are you complaining when it's like we have England fans aren't mad necessarily because, I mean, especially a couple years ago, like their 23-man squad wrote itself. That's a good thing. That means you have 23 players who have distinguished themselves among the rest of your pool. And the fact that we even lose two of them and are able to call in guys who are still having phenomenal, well, Brendan's not having it. Call in a guy who's having a phenomenal season to replace another guy having a phenomenal season. That's a great thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a good problem to have. I mean, I think where we can see maybe a concern is that, I think the talent level with the first, the group of players you have is quality, but like this, you know, the so-called game changers, we don't have a lot of those, right? I think that's,
Right.
I think that's where, where I get concerned, as a fan, like what happens if, you know, some of these players are not available, for the big tournaments, for the
Yeah.
big events. Like that's concerning, right? Because like in certain positions, it's not a problem. Yep, okay, fine, you'll just slot in this player or that player, right? You're okay. But like, and I think that's always been a problem. And it's not a U.S. problem. We don't have depth like France, obviously, and few do. But like, their second team can,
Yeah,
go out there and
do very well.
do very well, right? So, so I think that's maybe where wishful thinking
Mhm.
exists with that, but like you've got to you know have reality behind that. I want these things too as a fan, but like you're not buying players. You got the pool you have, like, and
Yeah,
maybe
like he can only scout so many players. What do you want him to go like make another dual national? Like
well,
just
that's the
create
thing.
one
Like
that's
there's what, I don't know, a handful of dual nationals we hear about, we kind of watch and follow, but like I don't know if they're just not interested or they're not
yeah,
healthy. I mean, that's the thing.
or they're
Like
not ready
so,
to make a decision.
right. And so
You know,
you can't force that onto them
yeah,
because the big tournament's coming up, right? And so and they have to want to play for the US. So that's the other thing. Like as much as I wanted every dual national,
yeah,
you kind of, they kind of have to have some, some skin in the game too, right? And and you've seen certain ones like Musa just take it all in and
yeah.
just, give everything he's, and I love it.
Well, and I mean, even like a guy like Christopher Lund, who has seemed to come in and like seemed like he really impressed both teammates and coaches. That's a good thing. And that was also a scouting thing. So there you go. The other semifinal, by the way, important to note, Canada is not in these Nations League finals, and I thought they were somehow like the best team that's ever existed in this region. Right? That's what they've been telling us for 3 years now. They're not in the finals. Weird how that worked. They actually lost to Jamaica. And this is why Jamaica should not be taken lightly, though, because Jamaica did beat them at home. Lost 1-0 in Jamaica and then went up and beat them in Canada 3-2. Anyway, just wanted to have a quick dig at Canada. But in the other semifinal, you have Panama and Mexico. And Mexico is down bad. Panama is rising. They've had a great year. You remember they made the finals of the Gold Cup because they beat us. Mexico ended up beating them in that Gold Cup final, so we do have kind of a rematch of that. What do you see from that final? Who are we, or that semifinal? Who do you think we're playing in the final?
I mean, my head tells me Mexico, just because it's Mexico. But to your point, Panama is an up and coming, international team in CONCACAF that has slowly chipped away and kind of doing the right thing. So I think it's going to be, I still think it's going to. I think Mexico's experience in general probably, outweighs that a little bit for Panama, but it will be. It should be a good match, between the two. But I think Mexico will find a way to win.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's most likely USA Mexico in the final. The only reason it didn't happen last time is because we found them in a semifinal. Obviously, they got a little help from the football gods, if you will, to make sure they made it not only qualified, but then also were not in the seeding matchup with the US. But yeah, I think it's Mexico in the final. And, even if it's Mexico, I'm still not starting Tim Ream. Sorry.
I agree. I don't think, again, he's a good backup. He's fine off the bench towards the end of the match for a third center back defender, but he's definitely he's losing pace, he's losing steps. Um, and this is where Greg's got to make tough decisions. Where he's got to say, hey, this is not he's not the Tim Ream that he was at the World Cup, because he was unbelievable there. Like I mean, but
But
again,
if you have to bring him in as, like, let's say this, we have to go to a 3-back, then that's fine. Bring him in as a third center back. I mean, great. We got to close out a game. That's not a
oh
bad
yeah,
option to have,
absolutely. And again, I think that's the key, right? I think now where Greg has to kind of have maybe these conversations, like, look, this is your role, right? Like, you're going to
Be a
come in.
good dad on the team.
Right, and that's the thing. The players have to understand what their role is
Yeah.
and their responsibilities are. If they're not starters, and even when they are starters, they have their roles, and
Mhm.
so that has to be clear and direct messaging from Greg to lay that out there, so players understand what that is, and like anything, you always have to be ready for your time on the field, potentially start, right? If you're called upon, but
Well, I think we both agree the U.S. is obviously winning our third Nations League final, or Nations League trophy, right?
we'll see. I mean, I tell you, it's crazier things have happened with this, and the players have to be do their part and get through. Soccer's a crazy game. The longer matches go with no goals, the more tight it gets out there, and I would love to have these matches just be no contest for the United States, and they just dominate, and they win 3 or 4 goals, but because I think they've got the talent to do that, and we need to start seeing that, especially against CONCACAF teams, because it sounds like we'll be playing some here. It sounds like they're going to be playing. They've already scheduled the match in Mexico sometime in the fall. I
Yeah.
read an article about that. So
Honestly,
yeah,
whatever.
you
Fine.
not Mexico, Canada. Excuse me, Canada. So
Oh,
um,
yeah. Okay.
yeah. But again, but you've got to go and dominate, right? Like,
Yeah.
you have to beat these teams and leave no doubt.
And this is where, before we get to Twitter questions, I think this is just the important thing. And there's this narrative on Twitter that I do agree with, is that, look, Greg, we know that we can win trophies, but winning a CONCACAF trophy now is the norm. And if you don't do it, if you don't show well, you're under pressure. And I agree, because, like, last time we won by an aggregate of 5-0 over the 2 games. Um, it was a very dominant uh, showing against Mexico and Canada, the 2 teams who I would argue are the ones who are most likely to usurp us as the best team in the region, if you will. Um, I don't want to say I expect that again, but uh, to answer the first Twitter question we have from Football's Final Frontier at FFUSAIN, what do you think the scoreline will be for the USMNT Jamaica game? It better be 2-0 or better. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I would agree on that. I mean, it's they have to be going out and doing that. And I think, look, Mexico dominated for decades, decades. Again, it was a different time in soccer. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure, but
but they dominated for decades, and so and they just had the resources and the talent,
Mhm.
for a long time. And the
but we
U.S.
have
did.
those resources now. That's the thing.
Right, and that's the thing. And so we have the resources. We certainly have the talent, and they're all playing at a high level. So
Mhm.
there's really no excuse to that. And I think when you're not performing that way, some of it goes onto the players for sure, but someone has to follow the manager too, right?
Yeah.
Like, if he's not positioning them for success, then he's part of the problem, right?
Right.
And I think that's where I want to see. That's why I haven't seen Greg improve with that. Like, Greg's second stint has not been great, with the U.S. Like, you know what I mean, losing in Trinidad and Tobago to not a very good team,
Not a good team at all.
not good. Like, so,
And
like,
I know it was, the red card thing, but, like, that's also on you, man.
well, you got to figure it out. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to have your contingency plans in place if that happens. Like, have to know the scenarios, and I think that's where Greg lacks, any of that sort of, like, soccer knowledge.
Yeah.
And look, I think the pressure's on Greg a little bit. Like, he's got to show well in these tournaments. Like, he's expected to win, right, in this Nations League. He's expected. If he doesn't, that's a failure,
Yeah.
right? And there's no excuse. He's got a good roster.
Yep.
Go out and do it. Get these players ready to dominate.
Do you have the final score prediction for the Jamaica game?
I hate predictions.
I know
I'm
it's
not
two,
good.
and it's also 2 days before the game, so
Yeah,
a lot
I
can
mean,
happen.
I
But
think
on
to your point, I think
Tuesday, March 19 at 7:13 Eastern Daylight Time. What's
yeah.
your?
I think to your point, I could see a 2-3-0 result in there for them. I mean,
I'm gonna go with 3-1, just because I think it's gonna be like Jamaica's. They've got a lot of great attacking talent.
yeah. That's the thing. They've got to have win by multiple goals differential. And that's my opinion on that. So what if it's 3-1, if 3-0, 4-1, 4-0, whatever it is, they've got to do that. They've got the talent. They've got to find ways to get those goals and
You have to score multiple goals with this attacking talent against this Jamaican backline. You have to.
yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. So it'll be yeah, I'm pumped for it. I can't wait. It's as I said earlier, it seems like a long time since this group has played together. So
All right. So the next question comes from US Soccer Bot on Twitter. Follow him at US Soccer Bot. He puts a lot of great graphics about stats, lineups, all that kind of stuff. He's really good. Cardoso or Musa?
I think it's opponent based. Who you're playing, what's the opponent, right? And then what the game plan is. If you're a reasonable manager, I think they both offer similar pieces. I think my one criticism with our central midfielders is they don't provide any real scoring threats. So
yeah.
Musa a little bit more, but we've seen less and less of that from him, right?
Yeah.
And so
especially at club, he used to get a goal or two on occasion. Yeah, he hasn't really provided that.
That's the thing. I think that's my concern in general. I think selfishly, I want to see Johnny because we haven't seen him with this A group. I said it earlier. I'll say it again. I want to see Johnny, but I think they're both very quality. I think they they offer different things out there. I think Musa has a little bit more ability to play the 6 and the 8. I think that flexibility is nice. Johnny, I think it's I mean he's putting some stuff up too. I think I just kind of want to see more Johnny with the international group. We've seen Musa, and he's been great, and he's been reliable, which is why I think he will start if Johnny's not able to. So it's not a clear answer, but
yeah, I agree. I think if Johnny is healthy, I would start him. At some point, he has to start. That's just kind of where I'm at. You can't baby him into that. The man's playing week in and week out in La Liga, so it's not like he should be used to pressure. That said, if he's not, then Musa as the 6 is a perfectly fine one. But I'm going to prefer Cardoso, Johnny Cardoso over Yunus Musa. All right, next question is from Dan Graham at UC Dan Graham on Twitter. How has Greg Berhalter improved any player in the squad? I mean, it's a sarcastic question from Dan.
It is.
It is a good one to ask,
But what I will say is, I'm not sure that's Greg's role, right? Greg's role is not to improve the players. The players have to do that at club level. Greg has to improve the squad, and when doing that, you have to put the right group of players together, which I still don't think he's done consistently. Put the best group of players to and game plan to beat certain high top tier opponents, right? That's the difference. And so he's going to have that opportunity this summer. And I think that's where that improvement, kind of is. I don't think he's responsible for doing that to players. I don't even know what the process is of a player switching clubs. Did Reyna talk to, Greg and say, hey, what do you think we go Nottingham Forest? I doubt it.
Well, I don't think Reyna talked to Greg about that.
Right. But you know what I mean?
Johnny talked to Greg about hey, what do you think about this club or this club? That actually is a good example of is that even Greg's job?
Right. And I'm on the fence a little bit of that in general, because Greg may have certain biases towards what's best for the national team, not what's best for the player, right? And so that's where you got to kind of have to be careful with that piece of it.
I mean, I think if a player reaches out to him, his job is to provide that guidance. But I think it's unfair to say that I'm agree with you. It's like, oh, why did you made any player better? Well, he doesn't see these players all that often. And if you want to be honest, the player that he has made better, and again, I'm giving this very leniently, is Matt Turner.
Yeah, that's the one.
He gave him the opportunity, and he's given him enough opportunities for him to kind of elevate his game and continue to step up the ladder. The other one is Tim Weah, but like Tim's was already a really good player. He just happens to actually get productivity out of Tim, as opposed to a lot of his club managers recently. But like, I don't think that's fair to put player development on a national team coach.
Yeah, it doesn't exist for U.S. soccer, right? Like they have to have a better vision, I think, and a better way to build the programs up and what those expectations are. But they're not doing player development, especially at that, once you get to, U17 level, like they just at that point if they're good enough, they're gonna be on the club somewhere, and that's where they develop. So.
All right, the final question, and this is about a snub. So, and it's from an Atlanta fan. So, Jason at Red Dragon ATL wants to know why. What do you think Brandon Vasquez has to do to get in this squad? And a lot of Atlanta fans and Cincinnati fans and whatever are very mad that Brandon Vasquez is not in this squad. What do you think he needs to do to make the squad?
Vasquez, it's an interesting one. I like he's got to offer a different skill set as a striker, right? He's a poacher. He's a player I'd want if you need to go late to put in there. Like that's why I like the player, right? He's got to continue obviously what he's doing. I think probably he's got to do it at a higher level. I think I think it was a right move for him to go where he went, but I think he's got to quickly do another move, and he's got to be playing at Championship League or some other maybe Dutch League, and perform over there and do it there, right? And so I think that's what you need to see from him, is that next level. I don't know if he wants it. I don't know if there's interest in it, but he's definitely showing well right now, down in Mexico. So I think that that's kind of what I think of it. I mean, he's not going to get the call in over. He's what, fifth best.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. Is that what do you think he has to do? He's doing everything he can. The problem is that above him are Haji Wright, who's having a great season in a better league. Josh Sargent, great season in a better league. Pepe, who's playing enough and producing enough in a better league. And then Balogun, who is kind of the number one. And I know he hasn't had a great league season, but he's playing in probably the best league out of all those guys. So, I mean, there's nothing more he can do. He just has to keep doing it. And as you said, hopefully he continues to get better and moves to a better league.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge when you do start developing that depth. Like what happens to those players? Like, they kind of get forgotten a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Like there's not like a national team A camp and a national team B camp, and so for players like a Vasquez who is in his prime right now, right? And so he's in kind of no man's land, which is really a shitty place to be for him. I really feel for players that are performing at that level and just not able to do that because there's just not a spot for him. He would have to just do it at a higher level and do it better, right? And I think I don't know if that's in the cards for him or not. I mean, it sounded like he, might have had some opportunities to go to Europe, this year, but they didn't pan out. So I think he's got to just continue what he's doing and keep on that radar because he's definitely on the radar. Because you don't want to fall off that because I think when he's at a spot in that radar where he's on the tail end of it, where, and there's
he's successfully jumped Jesus Ferreira,
right?
And I think that's all he can keep doing is try to keep jumping guys,
right? And he's an interesting player. Like he could be a player that gets called in as an overage player for the Olympics, right?
Sure.
Striker is a position of not great depth, like for that U23. So maybe he gets that opportunity, right? And if he can show there, he's going to still be on the radar. So
all right, well, Nations League semifinal against Jamaica on Thursday, March 21st. That is a 7 p.m. kick. If we win, we play on Sunday, the 24th at 9:15. Both of those are Eastern times. Thomas, thanks for joining me. Make sure you go follow him on Twitter at USKeeper and reply to his tweet about the jerseys that he put out today. That's on Tuesday. Respond to that. The 3 categories of jerseys for the U.S. men's national team. Make sure you follow the show at Soccer For Us Pod and support the show at buymeacoffee.com/soccerforuspod. Thanks everyone for listening. I'm Bart. I'm out.